thanks very much for the introduction, Lane. It's glad to see you also have trouble saying fresh relevance. I actually find that kind of hard to get across on cold calls sometimes. It tends to come out a little bit jumbled. But today is a topic that I think James has mentioned to me. He gets a lot of requests for, that industry-focused sales confidence events. There's clearly a demand to be speaking about this sort of thing within the community. And it's a topic I have often wondered about a lot, and apparently other SDRs have as well. Best practices in the SaaS industry are often pioneered by other sales professionals who are selling into the sales sector, and they talk and give advice on a ton of gold dust within the industry, and it's helped me out tremendously. There's actually people on this event here today who've given me some advice which has really helped me in my career. But what I've learned, and from speaking to other SDRs in the lead up to this talk, is that you have to take this advice sometimes with a bit of a pinch of salt to see how it will work out for you and how you can mold it to your own industry, because you might not see the same results as others do have. I'm going to center this talk around a chart that Jeremy Donovan from SalesLoft kindly shared on LinkedIn recently. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend having a look at it. It's a really cool thing to see. And it shows how more or less likely prospects are to apply than average by their industry. So on this graph, salespeople are 66% more likely to reply than average. I think the reasons for that are quite obvious. You know, as salespeople, we do appreciate good prospecting. We appreciate the craft that goes into it. And we're just more likely to respond to videos, voice notes, being extroverts ourselves. Whereas other prospects don't necessarily have an appreciation for the craft like we do, or they just aren't as forgiving. Some of them may hate being sold to, and they just aren't going to get that kind of response you're looking for. So what this means is best practice might actually change across industries, and I think other SDRs have experienced this themselves. So if we're going to look at Jeremy Donovan's scale, and as we move down the scale into the negative percentage on reply rate, how do things change? Does our best practice alter, or should it remain the same, but reply rates are just going to be lower? My experience is that it does change as you go further down the funnel, and certain channels have to become more important while others don't become as important, or in fact can't be used at all. So on this scale, marketing and e-commerce are at minus 10%. So I just fall into that negative zone. So it's probably a good place to start to talk about how it changes going from the positive to the negative score. And my experience with these personas is that persona-based and crisp messaging tends to be a lot more effective in the long run and actually get you better reply rates over email than attempting to personalize every single email you're sending out to your prospects. If you do choose to be personalized with these personas, you've got to be really picky about what you're choosing to do it on. And it's better to keep it work related than outside of that. I've seen fantastic examples on LinkedIn from SDRs who are sending really personalized emails to their prospects also in the sales sector, or someone with a positive score on that index, talking about their outside of work interests or, you know, hobbies they might be interested in. And I've tried to emulate that myself, and I've just not seen the results I'd expected or that others seem to have. Marketers just don't seem to respond quite as well to me doing that. I think I've heard some of them actually refer to it as token personalization before. It's not really relevant to them. I've spoken to a head of digital who actually dislikes salespeople talking about stuff like he also owns a dog, you know, whether you're a fellow fan of snow sports like skiing or snowboarding. He said he's much more likely to respond if you just tell him what you do and how it helps him. Another one of my colleagues actually booked a meeting, and the reason the prospect took it, he gave it when he turned up, and he said it's not because of the attempts at personalization my colleague went to, because he included quite a lot of good stuff in there, but it's because he highlighted a problem he was currently thinking about, which is what made him want to speak. So the lesson we've learned is that as you move into this negative score, these prospects tend to respond better to personalization and clear job benefits if you are going to do it. You can get away with more once they're warm on the phone, but for their initial cold outreach, it's best to just be laser aligned with how you focus it. I've also seen a similar pattern happen on cold call openings as well. I know some SDRs have really good success with opening up with something like, have you got 27 seconds to explain why I'm calling today? And really, you know, this is going to be a sales call. Whereas I've received quite negative responses by trying to do that. My prospects seem to hate the fact that it was so obvious they were being sold to. Some of them even sighed and said, oh, go on then. but they didn't really want to hear what I had to say. So maybe it's because I couldn't pull it off, but it just didn't quite work for me as it has for others. So the lesson I've learned is you want to be understanding your prospect situation and the relevance of your solution to their persona. Using the challenges and benefits that our customers personally talk about on our G2 reviews has worked really, really well for us in helping understand what we do for them and how we can best prospect. Please do shoot me a message after this if you want to see some examples of what we see work for us in these industries. But to move further down this funnel and into the kind of realms of finance and data, I've spoken to some fantastic SDRs within the sector in the lead up to this. So I just want to give a big shout out to Charlotte, Alexia, Alex, and Jordan, who've helped me with this talk. And the general theme that they've told me as you move down this funnel is that some channels close up or have to be used differently. So at the minus 40%, for example, on that graph, many prospects in these industries don't live on LinkedIn or post. So key decision makers are that much harder to reach, and finding relevance on people's profiles is really difficult. So you can't send something that personalized or targeted. And doing things like LinkedIn voice notes or messages just becomes a channel you can't use at all. Also, stuff like video prospecting, which Jack touched on, has question marks and nuances in this negative scoring territory. It can work, but you've got to be very detailed and to the point. You can't get away with any warm approaches or any fluff. I think Alex even told me that his prospects won't even open a video prospecting message because they're so security conscious, they won't click on the link. So this just leaves calling as the most effective channel, as it is with everywhere else. You just have less options to do. So you've really got to master what you can do on a cold call. So the overall trend is prospecting these zones are more responsive to learning what you do, what your product is. So as an SDR, you want to lean more into knowing your personas really well and becoming an expert in your field to appear more consultative. So for these more corporate businesses, general rule is to focus on your job benefits. The overall trend is probably that the personality type across these industries is the big factor at play here. So financial personas are more likely to be analytical and only care about the value you bring, whereas more extrovert personalities probably respond slightly better to more in-your-face forms of prospecting and a wider form of outreach. There's not a golden ticket as across different industries of best practice. You've really got to find your own way of doing this and learn how your prospects like to be communicated to and understand how they want a message to be received. And that's going to help you form your own best practice. But the best bit of advice to finish on I can give is anyone struggling to find their rhythm, make a list of the top 5 industry challenges that you see, open with them on the phone, frame your emails around them, and you should see a lot more success. Jack, Nico, tough act to follow always, but it's been a pleasure to speak to you guys here today. I've attended many sales confidence events, and it's nice to give back to the community that's given me so much. So pleasure to be here today, guys. James, back to you on this one.